Welcome back to I've Got Shit to Say. My name's Megan Campbell, and behind the scenes, we have producer Brian.
Hello.
Hello. So today we're going to talk about how you pick a therapist. So if you are on a mental health journey, and this is something we get asked a lot about at our practice, is how do you find a therapist? How do you pick a therapist? But more importantly, how do you pick the right therapist? I wish there was a match.com for therapists because we're all just people, right? And in just like every profession, it's a bell curve. There's some really crappy ones. There's some decent ones. There's some excellent ones. And so I think this is a good topic to talk about. Like, we're in a small town here, and so there's not necessarily a ton of options. But the options that we do have, there's a decent variety. And so wherever you're at, you probably do have a variety of people that you can have access to. And so figuring out how you find the right therapist for you, I think, is really important. If therapy is important. I know in the last episode we talked about, different ways to kind of work on yourself, and it's not always therapy. Therapists, I will say point blank, have to have a master's degree and have a license to be credentialed.
You can't just say I'm a therapist?
No, you definitely cannot. You also cannot say you're a counselor. So that has recently come up too.
So is that truly a thing that is out there?
So we are in the state of Illinois, and that is. So clinical counselors are therapists, but we would rather be called clinical counselors because therapists, I had a supervisor one time tell me therapist ends up being the rapist. So nobody wants to be called that. So, explicit mental health podcast, we're just like hopping in deep with really inappropriate stuff. So it's also the way in which people speak about what they do too. So in the state of Illinois, they need to be an LPC or an LCPC, which means a professional counselor or clinical counselor. So yeah, I'm sure you've been in places where people go to camp and they have a camp counselor, or
Yes.
we have some local agencies where they have professionals that call themselves counselors, but they've had a 40-hour specialty training, but that does not mean that they went to school to do counseling. So that's a little misleading to the public.
That is.
Which I will say is kind of, it's
I'm
kind
a part
of,
of the, I'm a part of the public. And
yeah.
and then that to just like to generalize it so blatantly is dangerous.
Right. Well, and I would say the same thing happens with therapists, right? So massage therapist, physical therapist, occupational therapist, right? There's like all of those things too. And all of that is important, and we should honor their professional licensure as well. Like, they have state licenses that they hold. And so for mental health counseling is what I would qualify as. We have counseling or clinical social work licenses in the state of Illinois. I would say if you're in a different state, for sure you should check out your state regulations. So just even like Googling or, that AI ChatGPT action, just to even ask, like, in this state, what is the license for somebody to be able to bill insurance if you're using it, or to provide counseling, clinical counseling per se. Because again, there's these really interesting things where, we might have somebody who's a professional sexual assault counselor, professional DV counselor, and what they really are is somebody who has a passion and have taken a 40-hour class on like how to work with that specifically. And that's like no shade to them, but they don't always. Sometimes they can have a master's degree in counseling, but they don't always. So that's a little misleading. And I would say, like, furthermore, I'm an art therapist. And I know, we have some plans further down the line to do a podcast on art therapy and what it is and what it is not. I have a guest plan for that one as well. Because that's a hot topic too. So there's people that are like, well, I do therapy and I make art in my therapy, whether that's, the public saying that or other therapists. So we work with social workers and counselors all the time that are like, I do art therapy. No, no, you don't. No, you don't.
And art therapy is kind of the baby of therapy? Like it's very new.
Yeah, I'd say like expressive therapists are younger. Actually, yes. I just got off my own art therapy and we were talking about Carl Jung, who is a psychologist. He's no longer alive. But we were talking about him being like the first art therapist ever because he created this thing called the Red Book, where he was analyzing his dreams and drawing all these like beautiful images, mandalas and things like that. So I'm sure in post edit we can throw up a quick picture of like what that looks like. But we were talking about how he was probably like the first like non-art therapist, but he was a psychologist and he was studying his own dreams. He was friends with Freud, if you know that name in psychology, or Adler, those kind of big names way back in the day. But people were using art from the beginning of time to do things for healing, right? Like shamans do art making, like historically, right? We had cave drawing, like all these things to preserve history, to share things with each other creatively. So like art in general, like we as art therapists don't own art. However, like from a regulation standpoint to protect the public, right, you can't just make art with a therapist or a counselor and then them call it art therapy. So I have super early on in my practice, I got a client. I have quite a few stories like this, but a client started seeing me and she specifically requested art therapy. And she said I had art therapy previously. And so we kind of talked through what that looked like and who she saw. And especially because I'm from a small town. And at that point, like 10 years ago, I was the only art therapist in town. So I was kind of like, interesting. But she was doing kind of like craft projects and art making with somebody who wasn't actually a master's level clinician, who wasn't licensed as an art therapist, meaning they didn't have specialized training in that. And they were having her draw some of her abuse stuff that sent her into an incredibly dissociative tizzy. And she ended up inpatient. Was so triggered by the art making that like she couldn't, right? So I think that's interesting because the public will say things to me, you know, clients will say things or other providers when I like respond to them that like, you don't really do art therapy. They'll say like, well, but like anybody can make art. And that is true, right? Anyone can make art.
Yes.
Not everyone can facilitate healing through art, right? And so our goal isn't necessarily to read the artwork or to analyze it, but it's to facilitate it in a safe way for people. And we have so much training to help that occur. In the same way that a counselor is using other interventions and things to guide the treatment, art therapists know what materials to choose when or how to support more or less of something based on what somebody's mental health symptoms are. And so it is really hard when the public is misinformed, right? And there are a lot of things that the public can be misinformed about. I'm speaking specifically about things that I've run into in our community here. But I think after that, like after knowing like what type of therapist you might want to see or who they are, there's then also who the person is, right? So like you first want to make sure that they have a license. It's like going to see a doctor. Like you don't want to see a cardiologist that is like a podiatrist. Like you don't want to see somebody for your heart that actually knows how to work on your foot
they're not moonlighting as a cardiologist on the side. It's like, you want them to like,
right. You want them
be
to
all in.
gone to school, have like done the training. Like, you know, you also want to know that like there are some checks and balances. Like we hear horror stories about medical professionals, and it's interesting because we don't necessarily hear as many horror stories about mental health professionals doing like inappropriate things, but it's not obscene, you know, for kind of like sake of a better term. Like when I work with my supervisees or my employees, we talk a lot about like, don't sleep with your clients. And they're always like, oh my gosh, like, why are you saying that? And I'm like, because I have witnessed people like be inappropriate with clients. Like there are books written about therapists that are inappropriate with clients. And that inappropriateness is a span of things, right? So your therapist is not your best friend. Like you guys should not be friends on Facebook. You should not be like, you should not know their family. They should not be connected to you. They should not be like, it's one thing in a small community to run into them in public and like you're not acknowledging them, but maybe they say hello to you because they feel proud of going to therapy. But your therapist, the other one we hear a lot about is like, oh, I know like basically my whole therapist like backstory. They're talking about their life. They're using their life as examples of what I should be doing in my life. red flag. That's like a super big red flag. Like talking about red flags is like people who say they're doing something that they can't do or aren't licensed or trained to do, or people who are making therapy about them, right? I think that's a really interesting. I've gone to a therapist before that did that one time, and I was like, I don't think that's what should be happening, right? Like,
it feels disingenuous. It feels, well,
that's tricky though. So I would almost argue about that is like, there is this place that therapy serves where when somebody is lacking like appropriate relationships or connection or friendship or, different types of relationships in their life, they can find that in therapy, right? There's a therapeutic relationship that occurs. And so, especially in private practice, there is a level of like, there's a ship, right? Like there's not a friendship, but there's a therapeutic relationship that's occurring.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that can get misconstrued in the space where clients might appreciate a therapist sharing something about themselves because it feels like, oh, we're in a ship and it feels like we're in the friendship. Right. So you also have to kind of like address like what ship are we on here, right? Like we're not in a romantic relationship. We're not in a friendship. But a lot of times people haven't had a therapeutic relationship before.
Right.
So they don't always understand those boundaries. So even, just like understanding that like a therapist might use an anecdote and it might not even be from their personal life. But then like, what is the client projecting onto that? And so where are the lines and the boundaries to make sure that's healthy? And we have codes of ethics. The problem is people think that's black and white and it's really not, right? There's so many shades of gray about what those things look like. And so people are like, well, I don't want to be totally cold and closed off as a therapist.
Right.
However, when a therapist doesn't work on themselves or they don't go to therapy for themselves or all of a sudden they're like telling you about their weekend plans or their bestie or their date with their partner and you're kind of like, this is interesting. And I will say more times than not, I have also seen so many clients that are like, well, my last therapist would tell me all of these things or would, so there's things that therapists shouldn't be doing, right? They should be living in the therapeutic relationship and be really clear about their boundaries. And that is a thing that we are required to do is like being clear, being open, being transparent about what those boundaries look like. And that's hard because that shifts and change. I know we just talked about boundaries a little bit. So like those things aren't just set in stone. Like just because a therapist addresses them, or a clinical counselor addresses them in the first session does not mean that they're going to not need to be addressed like at different stages of the game. And so if you have a therapist that just comes in and lets you talk about the week and doesn't do anything else, also not counseling or therapy, whatever you want to call it, right? So like that's like what you do at the bar with your friend. That's like,
Right.
That's like what you call up, somebody and talk about with. And so
I would like to jump in.
Yes.
Because I think that's really interesting. Because I never even thought about that. Yeah, because like you go to the doctor and it's clinical and you like, and the doctor is not my friend. Like if I see him outside, you say hello, but
maybe, or you're like, ooh, this is weird one day.
well, yeah, like when you were a kid and saw a teacher out, outside,
you're like, hey.
But when you're sharing things about yourself and it feels very intimate.
It's totally intimate.
And that feels like you said, a friendship. So that's what kind of
or other relationships.
Right.
I mean, like it can feel friendship all the way up to intimate, right? So there can also be something we call like psychosexual transferences where you start to be like, maybe I have romantic feelings about this person or like, and that's also important that the therapist is identifying and addressing them and setting the boundaries because that isn't always wrong or bad, but it like needs to be addressed in the space. And so like, and figured out, right? Like, is it really about me or is it about this experience of being vulnerable with each other? Like, and it really should be you being vulnerable with me. Like I should not be as the clinical counselor in the space being vulnerable back in that way. And so I think that especially in our small town has come up often where all of a sudden I'm kind of like, there's some like interesting things happening like in what the therapy is that's occurring in terms of just like, I think, again, like any professional, people can get complacent. They can come, they can sit down, they can kind of get paid to have coffee with somebody they find as a friend, that's not therapy.
No.
And on the flip side, the other piece that isn't like therapy or counseling or, like art therapy or any of those things we're talking about here is you also don't come to get fixed. So something else we see is, and this happens a lot with parents bringing kids, is there's this myth or this misconception that I bring my kid or I come to myself and you're going to give me a tool, you're going to fix me. So we don't give advice. We don't tell people what to do. I have plenty of clients that know that spiel from me. And so they're kind of like, just give me the answer, right. I can't. And as much as sometimes I would like to, because there's also this misnomer that we don't care about our clients. We do. We care about our clients. We want our clients to succeed. And I'm not living my client's life. I'm not making the choices that my client's making. I don't have to deal with the consequences of what my client, right? Like it's not directly what's impacting me as the clinician. And so there is this space of needing to empower the client to be able to reflect and a lot of reflecting back. And so if you're with somebody who maybe checks some of these other boxes, is a professional, is doing these things, but then is like, you need to do this, or this is the decision you should make, or like that's also not treatment either, right?
Well, no. And like I mentioned before, like I think as a society, we're used to going to the doctor and they give us an answer.
Yeah.
And
sometimes.
The
good ones.
Yeah. So when therapist-patient relationship, sometimes, like you said, that's what they're looking for is like, well, okay, I'm here to be fixed.
Yeah, what's wrong?
What's wrong? Now
what do I do?
Now what do I do? It's like, well, that's not how this works.
Well, and so those are like two sides of the same coin. So you have like the ones that are like, we're just going to talk about your week forever and ever and ever. And I've been like, to me, it's a red flag if you are like, I've been with this therapist for 10, 15 years. It's kind of like, well, so at what point did you need to find some of these resources outside of therapy? Right? Or has your life really ebbed and flowed and your symptomology has ebbed and flowed so much that you needed that, but it is, to me, the goal is to not need therapy. The goal is to learn the skills, to be able to process, to gain insight about yourself and your way of working in the world, your patterns, things like this, so that whatever suffering you were coming in with, or whatever issue related to your wellness you're coming in with, that you could do and address in a way that is functional on your own. On the flip side, right, we also don't just give a prescription to fix it. Your therapist might ask you or give you homework. I love a good homework. Homework's not telling somebody what to do. It's like offering them guidance of something to practice, right? So the goal of that would be, here's some things that like might improve, like that you've done here or that you've learned about. Let's try this without me, right?
I love that you use the word practice. Like, and because that's...
Isn't that life?
Life is practice.
Life is fucking hard.
It is.
It's so fucking hard.
The fact that therapy is almost allowing you to practice, like giving you the permission to practice.
Yeah, like how to practice being a human. Being a human. But I think that's also the dangerous game that you play with a provider if you don't find the right provider, right? Like kind of coming back to our topic a little bit is that... Because
they might be practicing back at you.
Oh my gosh, yes. And the amount of times, like this topic is solidly because I will text Brian and be like, what the fuck? This crazy shit is happening. Like, why? Right. But it is, right? And I think that's the hard part is similar to doctors, mental health professionals are often put on a pedestal, right? Mm-hmm. That we have amazing mental health or we know all the answers. Fuck that. I literally just got out of therapy and was like, I'm the worst client ever because I know all the tips, tricks, coping skills, all of the emotional intelligence shit. I read this, I do this for a living. Like I'm going to be the worst client, right? And I have to be open because I know there's still blind spots. I know there's things that I still need to work on. And we have a phrase like at my practice that is very much of like, you can only take people as far as you've gone yourself. So
ooh, I love that.
Yeah. That's and so great. Like, I also don't think there's any shame that if you're working with a provider, and this is another thing that I do think the public needs to know is that you are the customer. Like, you are the person who is paying for a service. It is a service industry. They should be providing you a service. Now, they should be clear with expectations, right? They're not there to fix you. They're not there to make you happy. Like, that's my favorite one is like when I ask people, what they came in, I want to be happy. Well, that's like not a thing.
Well,
we'll address that in a second. But there is this piece where, like, if you are leaving sessions feeling like, I wish I would have told them this thing and I didn't get to tell them. I have had clients like that where they're like, I needed to see a new therapist because my last person, I would sit in the parking lot sobbing that I didn't tell them the reason why I was there, and it was like, because for some way, shape or form, whether the way we look, the way we talk, the way we present, because we are also human too, doesn't make you feel safe to share that. Or we don't know how to drop into that work together. But if you can't tell them in 3 sessions the things that brought you in for the sessions, that's a red flag.
Okay, so you're saying, okay.
Like 3 to 4 sessions, you should at least be able to say, like, even headline, like, I have this thing that I want to work on. If they don't make you feel safe in that amount of sessions to share that, like, you need to move on to somebody different.
That's great advice.
Right?
Because
not advice.
Well, no.
Not advice. Professional consultation is what I'll call that one.
Yes.
But I think, right? Like, I get what you're saying in terms of that advice in the conversation we're having, but is like, oftentimes the public comes in and maybe they do share what is bringing them in. It is deep and it is hard. And the response they get from the therapist, that's the other side, is the response they get is maybe not what they needed or not, and it might not even be a bad response. I have heard bad responses. I mean, I've also personally had bad responses. I've had a therapist who asked me why I was crying about something very traumatic before, and I got up and left the session. So, like, again, on like the side of like, I've had these experiences, I've also had the clients share these experiences in that they're like, it wasn't the worst, but, and there's this weird need to protect the therapist. Where it's like, I'm not getting what I need, or that was really invalidating of a response. I couldn't tell them that it was invalidating, or I knew instantly by looking at their face that they couldn't hold space for what I was sharing, but I just kept going. Or, or I owed it to them. A new one recently that really fucked me up was one of my therapists said that a client told them, well, they can't leave their other therapist because that session helps pay the therapist's bills. And I was like, what the fuck? Right? So like, it's so complicated. Like, there's so many layers where like people are coming because they care about being better, and then they build these relationships. And then also, if they're not getting what they need, but they are maybe a people pleaser, or they have other patterns of behavior, they play those patterns out, right? Like, we play all those patterns out in all of our ships, right? Whatever ship you're on, even your therapeutic relationship. And so if you're not getting what you need and you can't even address it with them, and you get the impression that like you're the one making sure that they make their mortgage payment and you have to go every week, like, yeah, how gross does that feel? Like, it's gross.
I didn't even know that was a thing. And I mean, I guess it's a thing with everything, but especially with like therapy. Like, why would you do that to yourself?
But at some point, there's been some share or some, right? Like, there's been something in the relationship that has made that, like, that perception a reality.
Because when you said owed, I wasn't even thinking of like money. I thought you like time, like
all of the above.
I've spent so much time with.
Well, right, and so that's called like the sunk time cost, right? Like, is like, I've already put in this time and effort with this person. Maybe I need to keep going. And we see that a lot in relationships, like romantic relationships. People are like, I dated somebody for 5 years and we never got married. Like, but I've already put on this time. Like, what if I leave and they find somebody and get married? Like, or what if I wait a few more months and they do want to? But it's like, if you're doing that with your therapist, you're basically saying like, if I keep waiting, maybe they'll help me.
Right. Well,
I think kind of fucked up.
I think as a species, we're kind of prone to like what's easy, and leaving or change from a therapist would be hard.
Change is hard, right?
Change is hard. So
change
it's like,
is super
well,
hard.
they're not really helping me, but
Do you know what's harder? Staying the same.
yes.
Right? So like the
So much
definition of
so.
insanity, right? We all know that is like doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
That therapist, if they are just like baseline, they don't really want to be better, they're not working on themselves. You know, we've all been there in our careers where we're just like, yep, I'm going to like punch in, punch out, do the thing. That happens to therapists too.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if therapists have their own personal stuff going on that they're not dealing with, that shows up, you know? And so if you're starting to read like, ooh, like I'm feeling in a weird spot, or I don't even know that I can bring up that I feel like we're not progressing or the things I want to address aren't being addressed, that's a red flag too. Like if you can't be open with your provider
Right.
about what you need, or they are shutting down what you're saying your need is, that's another problem. So,
Okay.
right, that's another red flag is like if you're being really clear about it and they're not, it is their job. Like it is our job to make space for what they need
Right.
and to help them figure out, because sometimes clients don't know what they need. They know they need something and they're here for that. And so that is an exploration you should be going on, you know, but aside from making sure they're an actual professional, there is those other things of like, what are the things I'm looking for? I think when you're having a first session with a therapist, you should be interviewing them, right?
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah.
And not everybody thinks that. And so I think that's a really interesting thing too, is sometimes clients come in and they're like, we're going to get right into it. I'm like, oh no, we're not getting right into it, right? I'm going to tell you who I am. I'm going to tell you what I expect. I'm going to tell you a little about myself. And I'm probably going to tell you that it's going to get worse before it gets better. Because when you're like excavating emotional stuff, it's hard, right? The goal is never to feel happy all the time. Because like, what does that even mean?
Well, how do you know what's happy without the bad, really?
I mean, yes, right. And there's like 57 different emotions. Do people
Yes.
even realize that? So there's like a
Probably
lot
not.
of pieces of the puzzle of like the goal is that you can experience the emotions and that you can address them and sit with them. And they're not good or bad. They just are.
I like
right?
that. I like that mentality. Like
They
sad isn't a bad or a good emotion. It's just emotion.
It's also telling you something about
Yes.
yourself, right?
Yes.
And so are you willing to follow it? Are you willing to sit with it? Right? And so if you're learning how to sit with it, then that really ultimately is the goal of the work.
Yeah, and it really gets back to your kind of core point of like is trusting yourself to understand you, and the therapist should be helping you with that. Sitting with yourself.
Correct.
And then having being able to sit with those emotions and understanding them for you,
Right.
and not for anybody else.
And especially not for your therapist.
No.
So if you also feel pulled or compelled to give your therapist a specific answer or the right answer and not the honest answer, that's a problem. That's an orange flag, whether it's on the therapist side or your side. It's like orange going into red flag, right? Like,
Right.
it could be a pattern you're bringing to the table, but it could also be one that your therapist is reiterating, or like, therapists, something else that I hear with my team all the time is like, how do we measure success? Clients get pulled into that all the time too, right? Like, so clients want us to feel successful because when we feel successful, they feel good, we feel good, everybody feels good. And then we're like doing the happy thing again, right? And so there are these pieces where success isn't measured through happiness or like, I found the perfect coping skill that works for me. If that's happening, that's great.
Yes.
And it is that, like, how are we sitting with things? How are we moving through things? I like the word integrating. Like, how are we integrating parts of our life instead of pushing them away? And all of this is a journey. And so the person that's sitting in front of you needs to be a person that you're willing to go on a journey with. Like, I tell my family all the time, there is plenty of people I do not want to travel with in this world. Like, right? Like, we all have our quirks about traveling.
For sure.
I'm a flyer, not a road tripper. For a very specific reason, nobody should ever road trip with me. I'm a bitch of a road tripper. It's terrible. I hate being in the car that long.
Maybe that's a podcast, right?
Well,
there.
yeah, maybe, right? But then like other people love that stuff, right? But I think I would ruin that for them. And so that, like, I truly feel that way as a therapist is like, like if you want to travel in this way, which is my way of like guiding people, then we're a good fit, right? I'm a professional, I'm licensed, we figured out all of the business stuff that works for you in an ethical way. And this is my style. This is what to expect from me.
Yeah.
What do you need from me? Can I do that? Is what I'm offering to you what you could, right? It's that interview back and forth. I think it's great to ask your therapist if they go to therapy. I just had a moment this week with a client where I had like mentioned something about like I also go to therapy as well. And she was like really shook by that. And I could see why, right? Because we think that therapists have it all figured out. We think that like...
Right. We again, you've said we put you on a pedestal.
Right. And what I will tell you is the majority of colleagues that I have, they came to therapy because they have their own mental health stuff, right? Like we all have stuff. We all have our own personal connection, whether it is like family or like otherwise or friends or personally. And so it's kind of that like physician heal thyself, right? Like doctors get into certain career paths because of how it touches their life. And I would say mental health is the same thing. And so if that therapist hasn't gone and done their own work, then how do they know how to, right? How do you know how to guide you, right? If two people are trying to drive on the road trip, we were just talking before we pressed play about MapQuest and not having phones for GPS and this or that or other. So, right, like if no one had any directions, nobody knew where we were going, but we wanted to go somewhere, we had no idea where the next gas station was, or like that is...
Well, yeah, it would be like asking somebody from a rainforest and dropping them in Alaska and saying, give me a tour of the glaciers. Like that's not going to happen. Like
it's delusional.
Yeah, exactly. So
and on the flip side, I'm not saying that your therapist should have personally dealt with everything you've dealt with either.
Oh, no.
Right. So there's kind of like a difference there.
You have to understand that at the very base level, you're both humans, and there's flaws on both sides. So just kind of, I loved your journey analogy, and also that you're on it together, and again, like if you're willing to go on that journey, and also too, like because you mentioned something too, like somebody would find like, oh, I found this coping mechanism that really works for me, like. Well, along that journey, eventually, maybe that coping mechanism isn't going to work out anymore. So, like you said, you're always constantly kind of, I like to call it, adding things to your Batman utility belt.
Totally,
so like,
you're like evolving.
You're evolving. You're getting more comfortable with that, and also, change is good. It's not a bad thing. Like, it's a part of life.
It's also the only constant. It's the only thing that will be forever. Right? Nothing ever stays the same.
That's true.
Except for change.
Change.
Right.
Always change.
Yeah. And kind of even back to the analogy of like, if you're a road tripper or an airplane person or a hiker or whatever, you have to find the person that can guide in those places, right? Like I don't want to go.
That also might change too.
Correct. So I also like the metaphor of like hiking or camping, but like summiting a peak, right? So, which is also interesting that they're not letting everybody willy-nilly climb Everest anymore. And I was like, I love that also as a metaphor too, is right. Like you have to pick the mountain that you're ready to climb.
Ooh, put
first.
That on a t-shirt.
Yeah, right? So like not everybody is ready to climb Everest. I think the new thing that they like just released was like you have to prove yourself to be allowed to summit Everest.
Yes.
Right? Because so many people have been harmed, but also so much junk is littered everywhere because people are not even like taking back with them what they're bringing up.
Yeah, they go up and they're like, I can't do this.
It's disaster, right? But it's also because there hasn't been the experience in the prep. So, right, like it's okay if you're like, I can climb this little sand dune, right? I'm gonna climb this little sand dune 40 times before I'm ready. So I will talk to my clients about like, we came into treatment for this thing. We're climbing, we're working on it. Maybe we hit a snag, maybe we fall back, but we keep climbing until we hit some kind of level ground, right? Where it's like, okay, this tool in my Batman belt is working, right? This skill, this way of processing, or like this, it's clicked, like all the stuff we've been processing, all the narratives, like they've started to shift. I've done a lot of work. Okay, I'm going to make camp. like base camp, right? It's
I
like,
like that.
in the old school Oregon Trail game where you're like, oh, we're at the town. Let's refill with all the stuff, right? So I call that base camp, right?
Okay.
And that's a time to pause, to think, can this therapist take me any further? Do I need to do different stuff? Do I need to do coaching? Do I need to find a different type of therapy? You know, like first we need to look back and honor how far we've come, right?
Yes.
So base camp is also a time where you celebrate, right?
Celebrating.
You bust
That's-
out the drinks, you sit around the campfire, you tell the stories, like you do, right?
did
You
it.
sit. You sleep real good after like a nice meal.
Mm-hmm.
And then you wake up in the morning and you decide, do I want to live here? Do I want to make camp, right, forever, you know, or for a while? Or do I want to go on the next phase of the journey? And if I'm going on the next part of the journey, do I need a new guide? Or what is it, a Sherpa when you climb Everest, right?
Yes,
Is it
yes.
a Sherpa? Yeah, like is the neck, do I need the same Sherpa? Has this Sherpa done the whole thing and knows where to go?
Right.
Or do we need a different one for the next phase, you know? Or has this Sherpa, you know, been exhausted and burnt out? Or like, I've learned what I needed to learn from them and the next phase looks different. And that is maybe a time to change providers. Or do I need to take a break and just like make camp and live here? And like, I don't need to hang out. My Sherpa can go back down and bring other people up and they can make camp with me too and we can hang out. And so kind of like putting that metaphor into real life is like, therapists should often help guide you into a pause point of like, okay, we've been at this for a while. These things are working for you. Where are you feeling like let's celebrate where you've been, where you've come? Because so many times I talk to clients and they're like, oh, fuck, I did a lot. Like, do you remember 3 months ago I was doing that? And sometimes it's like 3 weeks ago, right? Like sometimes it's quick, sometimes it's 3 years, sometimes it's 3 months, right? So wherever your base camp is, it's like, let's reflect, let's summarize all that work. And your like Sherpa or your counselor is the person that holds all that knowledge. Like if you've ever, did you ever read the book, The Giver?
I don't think I have.
Okay, well, for our audience, The Giver is it's not a therapy book at all. But if you ever did read that, I feel like my school made me read that.
Okay.
But there was one person in the town that was supposed to hold like the collective unconscious, basically. Like they were holding all the memories for the community.
Oh,
It was it's a very interesting book. I need to revisit it because that.
Now I wanna- yeah.
To like
I'm
clarify the
gonna put that
metaphor
on the
a little
list.
more. That feels like a mental health book club thing where it's like not a mental health book, but becomes that.
Right.
But the therapist is that person, that giver, right? They're holding space for all that stuff. Some stuff maybe you have shared with other people, but maybe stuff you haven't shared with anybody. Some of it is nonverbal, some of it is verbal. If you're seeing an art therapist, it's like the image making that's emerging and the symbolism. And there is a time that you need to reflect on all that. If you just keep going and going and going and talking about your week and talking about your week, are you really just like riding the hamster wheel in the same spot and you've never even left base camp?
Right. It's like with anything, because
It's weird,
If you're
right?
not reflecting, if you want to become a better runner, you're not reflecting on what you've done and where you've been, or
Totally.
you want to be a power lifter, anything.
Life. If you want to be a human.
You have to
Yes.
stop and be like, look at where I've been,
Yes.
and that, especially for therapy, like
Right,
that-
and how does that inform where I'm going?
Right.
And that might be a time where in the therapy world we call it termination. That might be a time, and that sounds like a terrible word, like, oh, you're terminated. That's not.
Well, it seems hostile, but
It does.
no.
It's not hostile. It's a time where it's like, let's celebrate, and then we can say, like, this is done for now, right? And that's not a bad thing, right?
No.
And here's the other part. If your therapist or counselor, whoever you're seeing, doesn't want to let you go, that's a red flag. That's a red flag because ultimately, for whatever reason, they don't want to let you go, right? Because they like you, because they have built a relationship with you, because they don't think you're done. But if you're sitting there and you're reflecting and you're saying, wow, I've hit this point and I'm not sure I'm ready to go any further, right? We might say something to you is like, I hear you and here's this other work that I do think that would benefit your life, right? That's not advice. That's just like a clear direction from a clinical professional. That's great. And then you can say, no, thank you, right? You can say, I'm not there.
Yeah.
And we see this with clients all the time where something has occurred and they don't feel like they can share those things and they just start ghosting us, or they just are like, nope, I'm done, or right. And so it's not all on the therapist, but there is something there where you haven't felt comfortable to do to do the honest work of like, I really am done. I hear you. I respect you. And, you know, I don't want to hurt your feeling, whatever it is. Right.
Sure.
But if a therapist is often kind of weaponizing their feelings against you, that's a problem too, right? Like if you are so worried about hurting their feelings because they've expressed those things to you, that's a problem.
Okay.
Right? Not if you're bringing that to the table and you're kind of projecting it on them. That's something that needs to be worked on.
Yeah.
But if a therapist is saying things like, you know, like, oh, I'll miss you so much. Like, you're kind of like, ooh.
That feels
like,
weird.
It does start to feel weird. It's all of a sudden we're not in the therapeutic ship.
Right.
Right? We're not on the right ship anymore. Like pirates have come and taken me into a friendship or something.
Trust that.
Yeah. And that's a hard thing because a lot of people that are coming for support don't know how to trust their gut. So then like there's this weird ethical line of like, what are we taking advantage of? And is it knowingly or unknowingly, like as providers, you know? And so kind of going back, a great question, you know, my dad tells me this all the time is like, begin with the end in mind, no matter what you're doing.
I do that all the time myself.
Right. So when I started my business, begin with the end in mind. When you start, right, that should occur in therapy too. So a great question for a therapist when you interview them is, how do I know when we're done? Right? And if they don't have an answer for you, that's a problem.
Yeah.
If they don't have an answer about if they have gone to therapy or are going to therapy currently, if they are unclear about being able to give you information on their license, right? It's okay to ask for their license, for their license number. It's okay to look them up online. They should not be looking you up online, but you can do your due diligence. It's also okay to ask them, right? Like, how do I know this is done? How do I know when I have graduated or completed therapy?
Yeah.
If they don't have an answer for that, that's a little bit of red flag.
Okay,
like there should be some kind of answer. You might not like the answer, but like you need an answer of like, how do I know it's done? Right. And then furthermore is like, if they also think that they know everything, right? Every Sherpa does not know everything about every journey. I think in general, if you are thinking about going to therapy as a client, being able to interview your therapist, being able to clearly look at it as I'm going to pay for a service, you know, and there's a lot of things I need in that service. And sometimes there's things that pigeonhole our decision making, right? Like time of day, availability of therapists. But knowing what you're getting and knowing, you know, it is a little bit like Match.com, right? Like, you know, if I don't want to make art with somebody, I really should probably not go see an art therapist, right? They're not all going to make you see art, like do art. And some of them are also, not some of them, all of them in the state of Illinois are clinical counselors as well. And so they can talk, but there is this piece where in the way that we talk, we speak in metaphors. As you've clearly seen today in the podcast, right? Like that there is a visual language that's occurring. And so that might be something that you're drawn to. You know, there's a lot of hot button like therapy things that doctors will prescribe. Like the biggest one right now is everybody wants you to go see somebody for EMDR. Or somebody which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing.
I would say, I don't know what that is.
It's for trauma processing, and it uses bilateral stimulation, meaning like back and forth on both sides. So sometimes you can hold buzzers that buzz back and forth.
Is there a physiological response for trauma then? Is that what you're saying?
So what they're trying to do is you're like thinking through the trauma memories, and they're trying to help the stuck memories process. So I have had training in that. Here's what I will tell you. And this is true of a lot of things. Like again, I'm not an expert, but in 15 years of being in the field, I've had a lot of different trainings and a lot of different certifications. Plenty of them I don't use for a variety of reasons, but ultimately for me, and what I know to be true from clients that I've seen over 15 years is that the change occurs in the relationship, right? In the therapeutic ship, like the therapeutic relationship. And if I am so worked up and so busy into preparing some lecture, or preparing a handout, or having like, you know, the perfect intervention, like all those things are fine. But if I don't care about being with the person and I don't hear what they're bringing,
Right.
and I'm so busy with trying to fix them, I will miss the point, right?
Yep. Yes, you will.
I truly think that as a provider, I have a job because the rest of the world isn't great at being humans with each other,
Yeah.
right? We are not good humans. The current world shows that we are not great humans. Not all of us, right?
Yeah.
Like there are great humans out there. And we also are craving people just being with us,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so all of that other stuff, EMDR, CBT, DBT, like all the clinical jargon, lingo, intervention stuff only matters if it is clearly provided by somebody who is doing it intentionally to care for you in the way that you are being asked to be cared for. So like that second part is really important.
Yes.
Is sometimes providers think they know better than the person.
Mm.
And that is not true. So the same thing I think occurs in psychiatry. And I feel comfortable saying this because I've worked with a lot of amazing psychiatrists in my time, is psychiatry is under the medical profession. The medical profession likes to think that it's a science. Similar to mental health, like psychology is called a soft science, right? I
Sure,
would say
yeah.
that is true too, is like, you know, that psychiatry and some of the other like things, a lot of autoimmune diseases and other things like that, that even fall in the medical profession are an art and a science because
Yes.
no one else is in your body,
True. Yeah.
right? No one else
100%.
is in your head. You are the only one that knows how to report your feelings, or maybe you don't even know how to report them, but you're the only one experiencing them.
Mm-hmm.
You're the only one who like is struggling with them, right? There isn't a blood test for how you feel. There isn't, right?
Wouldn't that be great?
I mean, there's things like that can be like, oh, well, you feel fatigued or you feel this because of like things that are biologically happening.
Yeah.
But psychologically, there are things that occur that you can't take a test for. And so if you cannot be honest with your provider, that's the art of it, right?
Okay.
That there's like yes, there's some science. Yes, there's some theory. Yes, there's like some collective things that have existed beyond time, back to Carl Jung and Freud and all of them, that just kind of keep coming forward about humanity and life. And you are your own, right? Like kind of an existential way, like you are experiencing your own thing and you need to have meaning and purpose. And if your therapist doesn't make you feel like you have meaning or purpose in the work that you're doing, problem. So Brian and I just talked about, we will make a list of those interview questions. So
I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
As somebody kind of an outsider looking in, I think that would be so helpful. And just arming yourself with some knowledge, and especially if you're new to therapy, just having something and feeling a little bit more comfortable in that space, and with the power to ask some questions and you know and not in any bad way, just to like be able to like
informed. You need to,
being
right?
informed.
It's part of informed consent. They should be telling those things to you. Unfortunately, they're not always telling you those things. And I think,
well, again, they're human, so they're gonna maybe forget those things, or they'll come up later. But you having those discussions and having the questions at hand just helps you get all on the same page a lot quicker.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, and we just talked kind of in one of the previous episodes about expectations, and when we have missed expectations, the ship is really doesn't go on the right journey, right? And so this applies here too, in that the expectations should be clear, and so that it can also be like, hey, you remember when we talked about how like this is how I know we're ready to go? I'm feeling that way, like feeling like, and so there'll be some practical questions on the list. You should, if you are paying for the services or using insurance, like legally, they do have to let you know that ahead of time. A lot of practices do, but there are still some practices that don't. That's no surprises act. That's really important that they're like legally giving you that information. Nobody wants to be stuck with a $200 bill for something when they're like, I just sat there and told you about my life and you did nothing. You drank your coffee and now I have to pay you $200. That's wild.
Right.
So you also have to know what you're buying ahead of time. Right.
Yep.
And so, I think thinking about it in those terms is helpful as well, as like knowing like, what am I buying? Whom am I buying it from? What are they giving me? What are they offering? The other thing is being able to ask them, not only do you have a license, but do you have any specialized training? Like,
that's a good one too, yeah.
or experience in working with X, Y, and Z. Like if you are coming with something very specific, if you're coming for divorce or for anxiety or for depression or for trauma, or a variety of other things, asking, like, have you worked with somebody with this before?
Right.
That's kind of important.
Right.
Right. And then to just be like, do I want to be the guinea pig? Maybe not.
Right. Well, and it's just like in the, like we discussed earlier, in the medical profession, there's all subsections of medical profession stuff, and the same with the therapist as well. So finding that person that like, oh yeah, and you want them to click, you want them to understand, you want them to, like, you know, not just be like,
yes,
well, let's figure it out along the way. Like, no, let's not do that.
Yeah, right. When I say they need to be one step ahead of you, it doesn't mean like just like 1 week ahead of you.
They're winging it, yeah, week to week.
Right,
it's
right,
like,
yeah. So it is important. And I do tell people that when you start a therapeutic journey, you need to give a provider, like after your interview, 3 to 4 sessions. So it's like trying a new food. Like let's say I go to a restaurant and I'm going to try this sushi that I've never had, and I don't like it there. That doesn't mean I hate all sushi. Doesn't mean right? Like I might need to go somewhere else and try it somewhere else, or I might need somebody to make it for me, or I might need to try a different kind of it. And so, unfortunately, because of the vulnerable nature of what we do, sometimes people try it and have such a bad taste in their mouth that they won't ever go back. And a first session or an interview session is never like any of the other sessions, or it shouldn't be, because it's an intake, right? So it's like a blind date for the therapist and the client,
for both of you,
right?
yes.
Right. It's always that weird, like you're walking out to the like waiting room to be like, hi, who's here for who? And you're like hoping that they've looked at your picture online, kind of a thing.
Exactly.
So the therapist has those pieces on their side as well. And so, you know, we'll for sure curate a list, make it kind of a downloadable PDF, and it won't be an exhaustive list, but some of the like key ones that I think are really important for the public to be able to ask. And even if you're currently going to therapy, if you haven't covered those questions, I would encourage you to bring the list and just say like, hey, we haven't talked about this. Can we talk about these things? Like, are we at a camp where like we need to figure out where we're going next, or like, have we missed some things along the way? In order to level up, and just kind of making sure you're getting what you need.
Yes. I think that's a great spot to wrap it up.
I love that. Lunch is waiting.
Lunch is waiting.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
It's been great. A lot of great tips and helpful, just helpful to get you started on your therapeutic journey.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Until next time.
You got shit to say.
I do have shit to say. If you made it to the end of this podcast, thanks for listening. As always, if this episode brought up anything that you'd like to delve into deeper on a one-on-one basis, or any kind of mental health crisis that you might be going through, please see the show notes for resources and references as well. Thanks.